This presentation on the Teacher Code of Ethics is presented by the Educator Licensed Discipline Team of the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education is made up of 11 members. 9 of the members are appointed as representatives of their congressional district, either by the governor, lieutenant governor, or Speaker of the House. Tennessee is one of few states that has a voting high school member. And we also have the executive director of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission serving in a non-voting ex officio capacity. The state board is supported by a 16-member staff. The staff is led by Executive Director Dr. Sarah Morrison. The legal team is led by the General Counsel and consists of a Deputy General Counsel, Senior Associate Counsel, 2 Associate Counsels, and 3 paralegals. As visualized here, the Associate Counsels and paralegals are paired 1-to-1. This allows for the pair to manage all cases reported to the state board from start to finish from their assigned districts. The authorizing statute for the State Board of Education is Tennessee Code Annotated Title 49. The State Board of Education is the sole authority governing licensing standards and discipline of licenses for educators in Tennessee. The State Board rule regarding discipline, which includes a denial of license or permit, applications, suspension, or revocation of educator licenses, is Rule 0520-02-03-.09. The Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics is found in statute in Tennessee Code Annotated 49-5-1001 and the sections that follow. It is incorporated into the SBE discipline rule in paragraph 1K, which allows for discipline if an educator violates provisions of the Teacher Code of Ethics. As a reminder, all educators licensed by the state of Tennessee are subject to the State Board of Education rules. Additionally, application of the rule does not begin or end at the schoolhouse gate. Conduct subject to discipline can occur outside of school hours, and if it results in an employment action, felony charges, or under certain other conditions outlined in the rule, that conduct may result in an educator's license being disciplined. Turning now to the Teacher Code of Ethics, every LEA is required to conduct annual professional development concerning the Teacher Code of Ethics and its requirements. Additionally, every state-approved educator preparation program is required to instruct teacher candidates on the Teacher Code of Ethics. This initial and continuous training is not only required by statute, but imperative for keeping students safe and upholding the standards of the profession. There are 7 sections in the Teacher Code of Ethics. Today, we will draw your attention to portions of 3 sections. First, Section 1002 includes the legislative findings and declarations. Often this section is skipped to get to the more actionable sections we will discuss next. But it is important to note that when this legislation was first adopted in 2010, the legislature set out the importance of the profession and a code of ethics for the profession, noting an educator recognizes the supreme importance of the pursuit of truth, devotion to excellence, and the need to nurture democratic principles. Additionally, educators recognize the magnitude of the responsibility inherent in the teaching process. It is through this lens that we read and discuss the subsequent sections. Section 1003 outlines the educator's responsibilities as it relates to students. When the TCOE was first adopted, there were only 8 paragraphs in this section. There are now 19 paragraphs, with the most recent updates occurring during the 2024 legislative session. We have highlighted for you here paragraphs that are not explicitly found in other portions of our rule. To give an example, paragraph 1003B1 reads, "An educator shall abide by all applicable federal and state laws." The requirement to abide by applicable laws and specific conduct and criminal charges such as assault are found in several other sections of our rule. Looking at the slide, paragraphs 7, 8, and 9 overlap significantly and address the responsibility of educators to create conditions and environments that are healthy for students. This includes making an effort to protect students from harmful conditions that impact learning, health, and safety in paragraph 7, protecting the emotional well-being of students in paragraph 8, and not intentionally exposing students to embarrassment or disparagement in paragraph 9. Next, we have paragraphs 11 and 12. In 11, educators are reminded that they cannot use their professional relationship for private advantage. When this paragraph was adopted, there was concern about the impact on private tutoring by educators. This paragraph does not prohibit private tutoring by teachers, but be sure to check your local personnel policies for restrictions that may exist, such as time and location. Paragraph 12 reminds educators that they shall not disclose information about students gained while teaching. This includes both intentional and accidental disclosure. Paragraph 14 is one we see often within discipline as it relates to educators. Though our rule explicitly prohibits inappropriate communication, the TCOE also requires that interactions take place in a transparent and appropriate setting. This includes both in-person communication and electronic communication. Transparent generally means school or district approved communication platforms or platforms in which a record is maintained. Appropriate includes looking at the propriety of the content as well as the time and volume of communication. Finally, we've highlighted for you the last paragraph of this section, paragraph 19, which reads, educators shall maintain a professional approach with students at all times. This applies to all interactions with students and in many ways captures the entirety of this section, educators' responsibilities to students. We will discuss hypotheticals involving these paragraphs in just a moment. The next substantive section of the Teacher Code of Ethics outlines the educator's obligations to the education profession. Highlighted here are 3 primary paragraphs we see when reviewing licensed discipline cases. First, 1004B2, an educator shall not misrepresent their professional qualifications. This applies to academic credentials and endorsements, as well as the completion of personal affirmations when transactions are submitted into TN Compass. Next, paragraph B7, an educator shall not make knowingly false or malicious statements about a colleague. Please note that the State Board does not discipline personnel matters. However, and as you will see in one of the following hypotheticals, there are situations in which the statements could negatively impact students. Finally, paragraph C2, educators shall conduct themselves in a manner that preserves the dignity and integrity of the profession. The work of educators is imperative, as stated in the legislative declarations and findings, so when an educator's conduct fails to uphold the standards of the profession, it has an impact on both students and the profession as a whole. Let's turn now to a few hypotheticals. These are completely fictional situations. Also, they may implicate other portions of the law or State Board of Education rule. However, we are only examining them as a part of this presentation for violations of the Teacher Code of Ethics. Hypothetical 1. The kids at PS 123 are finally at recess after what feels like the longest morning ever. The spring has brought beautiful weather and the kids are excited to play, all except one. Miss Adams notices Bob is sitting under a tree alone again. On occasion, students run over to him and then leave. From a distance, it appears that they are trying to get Bob to play with them. This continues throughout recess until Miss Adams calls the students in. The next day, Miss Adams is called to the office during her planning period to discuss a phone call the principal received from Bob's parents. Bob was not at school today because he just couldn't face another recess. Bob finally told his parents that the kids treated him horribly on the playground, calling him busted-faced Bobby. Lo and behold, Miss Adams knew that the kids had given Bob the name busted-faced Bobby after a playground incident where he tripped over an old exposed pipe that she knew was there but failed to report. He fell and indeed busted his lip wide open, requiring stitches. Though that was in the fall semester, it seems that the name stuck. Are Miss Adams' actions or inaction a violation of the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics? If so, what provision? Yes, Miss Adams' actions, or lack thereof, are a violation of the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics. First, educators must make a reasonable effort to protect the student from harmful conditions. Miss Adams was standing so far from the students that she did not know what was actually happening to Bobby. A better choice may have been to walk around the playground to ensure student safety and check on the isolated student. Miss Adams also knew about the name calling starting in the fall, and the hypothetical indicates Bobby has a pattern of isolating himself. She should have made a reasonable effort to protect the student's emotional well being. And of course, precipitating the name calling was Miss Adams' failure to report a physical hazard. This failure indicates she did not make a reasonable effort to protect the health and safety of all students. Quick test, true or false. An educator can violate the Teacher Code of Ethics for misconduct against any student, not just students in the educator's class. This is true. Considering the playground hypothetical, even if Bob were not in her class, Miss Adams knew of the name calling and should make a reasonable effort to protect Bobby and students generally from harm, such as the pipe. Hypothetical 2. And remember, this is completely fictional, and this particular hypothetical is a bit extreme. It is the Friday before spring break, and students are understandably excited. Mr. Smith, an 8th grade history teacher, is also excited to have a break. One student, Ryan, has been acting out all semester. He is constantly disrupting class and often bullies other students and teachers. Mr. Smith is a friend of the family, so generally he can redirect Ryan's behavior. On this day, while transitioning back to the classroom from lunch, Ryan began acting out and making rude comments to Mr. Smith. Ryan ignored Mr. Smith's attempts at correcting the behavior and would not obey Mr. Smith's reasonable instructions to sit down at his desk so that class could resume. Mr. Smith, in a momentary lapse of judgment, tells him to shut the bleep up. You can't keep using your mom's addiction as an excuse to misbehave. We've done everything we can to accommodate your anxiety, and at some point you must take responsibility for your actions. Can't you see you're a problem right now? Is this a violation of the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics? Absolutely. We have several TCOE violations in this hypothetical. First, Mr. Smith Mr. Smith's actions would not be considered a reasonable effort to protect the student from harmful learning conditions or protect the emotional well-being of the student. Additionally, Mr. Smith's statement that included personal information about the student's mother, even if it was in the form of an outburst, could be considered intentional exposure to embarrassment or disparagement. The inclusion of a student's diagnosis and the accommodations, in this case anxiety, is likely information Mr. Smith gained while teaching, and to share that information would be a violation of the TCOE. And of course, I think we can all agree that Mr. Smith did not maintain a professional approach during this episode. Hypothetical 3. Miss Lily is a high school math teacher at PS 54, student population 4,500. She's starting her 4th year of teaching and is regularly mistaken for a student. All the kids love her though. She's both fun and funny, knows all the latest TikTok trends, and is pretty lax on her rules as long as the students get their work done. She even has a Snapchat and is connected with some of the high school students on there. Miss Lily is the track and field assistant coach too. She maintains a group text message with the track team to update them on any changes to their schedule. On occasion, she texts individual athletes about their effort during practice, changes they might want to make to their form, and the wild thing on the internet she recently saw. Miss Lily is particularly fond of one senior on the team, Jacob, who is also in her math class. They text regularly about how their days went, what he thought about the lesson, what he's planning for his life, and what she hopes for him once he graduates. Are Miss Lily's actions a violation of the Teacher Code of Ethics? Yes, Miss Lily likely violated the Teacher Code of Ethics. First, Miss Lily's application of boundaries in the classroom, or lack thereof, her lax way of going about maintaining her class, does not necessarily indicate she's maintaining a professional approach with the students at all times. However, if that were the only issue, then this is a personnel matter and not a violation of SBE rules. However, Miss Lily made several key missteps in this hypothetical. First, she is friends with students on Snapchat. Snapchat is not considered a transparent form of communication. Educators should consult their local policy regarding social media usage to be sure that they are in compliance. Next, texting students directly is not necessarily transparent, and Ms. Lilly would need to consult, again, her local policies regarding acceptable platforms for communication with students. The big issues arise when Ms. Lilly texts about non-sport, non-school related matters. To wit, that wild thing on the internet. This is not maintaining a professional approach with students at all times and could easily, depending on the content, time, and volume of texting, subject Ms. Lilly to discipline. Additionally, Ms. Lilly's individual texts with her student Jacob are cause for concern. Again, if reported, we would consider the time, content, and volume of text to determine if the interactions were appropriate or if the educator was maintaining a professional approach. Other issues to consider from this hypothetical and generally are educators in group texts with students not intervening when inappropriate content is shared by a student, including using or encouraging the use of alcohol or drugs, or a pattern of behavior that could be characterized as grooming. Tennessee, at this time, does not have an anti-grooming law. However, provisions of the State Board of Education rule and Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics are applicable to and prohibit what would be considered grooming behavior. Here's our last hypothetical. Mr. George, a teacher for 10 years, had his classroom moved to the opposite side of the building to accommodate Miss Thomas's request to be closer to the parking lot. She has a bad knee, despite several surgeries, and it is difficult for her to get to her previous classroom now occupied by Mr. George. This upset Mr. George immensely. One day, a student was complaining about Miss Thomas and what a boring teacher she is. Mr. George grumbled under his breath, saying she's a limpy, whiny bad word. He didn't think anyone could hear him, but teenagers have the sonic abilities of bats when they so choose. Not only did the complaining student hear him, but to others, including a student with a physical disability. Is this a violation of the Teacher Code of Ethics? Yes, Mr. George likely violated the TCOE. First, his statements about his colleague could be considered malicious. Additionally, he is not conducting himself in a manner that preserves the dignity of the profession. You can only imagine what the students might now say about the other educator or how it may spread like lightning through the school. Equally problematic, Mr. George's statements about another educator's disability overheard by the students could negatively impact how the students perceive the teacher, how the student with a disability perceives themselves, how that same student believes Mr. George perceives them, or it may change how the other students in class perceive the student with a disability as well, none of which is conducive to a healthy learning environment. As we draw to a close, there are a few things I hope that you will keep in mind. First, each reported case is reviewed on its own merits. We've heard several hypotheticals, most of which are fairly extreme and all of which are fictional. Each case reported to the State Board of Education goes through the review process as outlined in State Board of Education Rule 0520-02-03-.09. Highlighting for you that a review in and of itself is not a bar to employment. It is simply a review based on information received from districts or other sources that will again go through that process outlined in the State Board rule. Looking at the data available to us, we've noted that reports happen at about 10 years of teaching on average. That's when we're seeing the highest percentage of reports. and the average age of educators reported is 43. What this indicates to us is that after a period of time, there is a need for continued learning around educator license discipline and the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics. That is also why it's imperative that local education agencies, public charters, and others train each year as required by statute on the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics. And we would highlight for you that educators are sometimes unaware that certain acts are a violation of the Code of Ethics, and that both the district and the board may take action for the same conduct. The district would be taking employment action, while the board would be taking action against an educator's license. We hope that this presentation has been helpful for you regarding the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics. We have additional resources on our website under the Licensure tab, and that includes videos regarding an overview of the educator license discipline process and conduct subject to discipline as outlined in our rule. If you have questions, please email us at the email listed here, and remember to sign up for the newsletter using the QR code on the screen. Again, thank you.